I'm Pete Calandra. It's late January 2020, and over the last week or so, my social media, YouTube, and email inbox has been inundated with messages and posts from manufacturers touting all the new and amazing product that they are releasing this year. It's really easy to look at these products and get a serious case of gear acquisition syndrome. While it's true that something new can be an inspiration that will take your music to a new dimension, it's also true that learning how to get the most out of the gear you already have will take you further. With that in mind, I made this video showing some of the techniques I use to take a simple monosynth, the Moog Sirin, and use it as the basis to create complex soundscapes for Kontakt that are polyphonic and that you can control in real time. These techniques can be used on any sound source, from an inexpensive Arturia microbrute, an electric guitar, or even random environmental noise captured in your cell phone recorder. If you enjoy this video, give a thumbs up. For more content, please subscribe, and if you'd like to be notified, ring that bell. Thanks for watching, and let's get started. Before I get started discussing some of these techniques, let me take a minute to show you the setup here. I've got the Moog Sirin right here, audio output from the Sirin into the input of my Focusrite audio interface, plus USB MIDI. I also am using the Korg Nano Control 2 to control MIDI CCs. This will become important later on in the video. Inside of Pro Tools, I have an instrument track open with the Sirin editor from Moog. This is an excellent plugin, controls all the functions on the front panel of the Sirin, plus some additional not found on the front panel parameters and functions that you can change. Additionally, it separates the decay and the release, which on the front panel of the Sirin is locked together. I've created a basic sawtooth patch right here. Let me play this for you. It's really nice and beefy. Got two oscillators, one slightly out of tune to give us a little natural chorusing. I haven't really worked with the attack. I've kept it very sharp. That's something that I can play around with later on as I'm working on these sounds. Let me close this for a second. Now, there are some things when you're working this way, being creative, where you shouldn't really have a template for doing things. You should be open for experimentation. But there are technical tasks that will be greatly enhanced, and if you have certain things that are set up in advance that make it easier for you to capture the sound. Because we're going to be recording these sounds that I create into Pro Tools. So what do I mean by that? The first thing is that, as you can see in this MIDI track right here, if I open that up, I have all the notes that I want Sirin to play. I'm going to be recording these notes as audio. Every note is basically the same length, with the same velocity, with the same amount of space in between. I've got my tempo for the session set at 60 beats per minute. And this way I can just let Pro Tools play the notes for me. And then I can just sit and wait the 10 minutes it takes to get through the entire run. I don't have to worry about playing or messing anything up. And I've got all of my intervals here set to a minor third. C, E flat, G flat, A. Then up an octave, C, E flat, G flat, A, all the way up. So let's take a look at what I've actually done here. I've recorded all these pitches. Right, I'll just randomly go through these quickly. Once I heard that, I thought, you know, it'd be really cool to be able to have a sound that's reminiscent of things that Keith Emerson might have done on the Trilogy album, where he played a 3-oscillator mini Moog, and he had the oscillators tuned in fourths. Oscillator 1 was probably the fundamental, and then there was a pitch above that, a fourth above that, so F, and then a fourth above that, B flat. I started thinking in terms of doing something like that, and what I thought would be kind of cool would be to do a suspended fourth chord. I recorded all of these pitches in at the same pitch as the MIDI information, then I transposed the MIDI information up a fourth did a second pass, and then transposed the MIDI information up one more step, whole step, from the fourth, so that I've got a fifth from the original pitch, and then I recorded all of those as well. That gives me something in the aggregate that sounds like this. And the next thing I did, so that I can have some spatial element to this, is that I panned the fourth all the way to the left and the fifth all the way to the right. One thing to notice, though, is that on some of these very, very low pitches, it's so muddy that it's unusable. What I did was, on this first one, I left just the fundamental. That's a really nice, beefy sound. Then up the minor third to the E flat, which is this pitch here, I bring in the fifth, and we've got a little panning going right now. And then I waited until eventually I got to a point where all three pitches sounded good together. Now, I can record all three of those things together as one audio file, commit or bounce to disk, and make a stereo file, and then edit all of those things out. And to make an instrument that I can play, I would program that into Kontakt. I'm using a Sirin, which admittedly is a little bit of a pricey mono synth, but you can do all of these techniques with a Korg Monologue, with an Arturia Mini Brute, or Micro Brute actually even. You could do this with a Novation Bass Station 2. All of these mono synths sound fantastic, and they give you great raw material that you can use and do some of these techniques that I'm about to show you to create your own unique, evolving, beautiful textures and timbres. Let's get back into this again. I can create just a basic instrument, but what if I start taking the output of these three tracks, bussing it through an aux input, and then start adding some plugins to change the sound, do some sound designing to it. I've got here the J73, which is a tape plugin from Waves, and it's pretty good. Let's go a little bit further so that we're up in a higher pitch register. It just smooths out the sound a little bit. It's very subtle. I can hear it on the headphones. Smooths out that timbre a little bit. So that's the first thing I did. The next thing I did was I wanted to carve out a little bit of the mid-range so that my sounds didn't get too muddy. So I put that through a C4, which I use not just as a multi-band compressor, but actually as an EQ. And you can see that I'm just taking a little bit off the mid-range here. What it does is it gives you a little bit of a sharper sound now, because you're hearing the lower harmonics and the higher harmonics, and you're taking out a little bit of that mid-range. That's the first thing. When you think about this, I've got a 6 oscillator aggregate. Each of these three voices has 2 oscillators, which gives me 6 oscillators in total. So what I've done is I've added a little bit of this MXR flanger, and I've got a gentle chorus preset that I've tweaked a little bit. I'll turn the mix up so you can hear it a little bit more. That's a little bit too much. Again, just to give a little bit. And my goal here is not to dramatically change the sound at this point. My goal here is to do some subtle things that when you add them all together will affect the sound. It's a lot like mixing and mastering. The next couple of things that I've done will all be time-based. The first thing is that I've added a little bit of this H delay set to a half note, 2 beats, and I've got it ping-ponging left and right. And I've got a moderate amount of feedback, and only a little bit of it is wet. So let's take a listen once I've added that. Right? If I stop it. Let me make that a little bit wetter and play it back. That's a little too extreme for what I want, but I'll put it back down to 16. And then the next thing I'll add is the Pro R. And I've got this set fairly wet and the mix at about 50%. Admittedly, I'm using fairly pricey plugins. I didn't purchase all these things all at once. I've been doing this for a long time. And what I do is I wait for sales. I'm researching cool new plugins, and when they come out, I don't jump on the gravy train and purchase them immediately. I make a list of things, and when I see that things are on sale, I purchase them. I got this one for about half price. I got the Waves H delay for $20. It was on sale, or $29. If you're patient and you wait, you can, for not that much money, start adding these really cool sound shaping devices into your computer kit. That being said, Logic's stock plugins are much more advanced than what comes with Pro Tools. I have Pro Tools HD, so there are a lot of additional content that they add into that plain vanilla Pro Tools doesn't have. So I could do that stuff, but I've been acquiring these other plugins over time, and I'm going to deploy them. So let's listen to this sound now. So that adds a lot of depth. That sounds very static as a sound. But once I get these things rendered as audio and then I slice them up into samples, label them properly, and program them into Kontakt, I will have stuff where I'll be able to do things like this. By playing around with the filter. And that's something that I'll set up in Kontakt, and I'll be able to control it from the Sirin. Now, if you don't have a synth that is capable of transmitting that stuff, you can certainly use something like this Nano Control 2. It's great. It's got knobs on the top that you can set up that emulate these knobs here, and you could program them to do the kinds of things that I'll have the Sirin do. I will be using this for one parameter. Now, the last thing, and this is a great plugin if you're going to be sound designing, is to use this thing called Adaptiverb. This is an amazing harmonic reverb. And I believe, let's see. Yep, here we go. This is a harmonic tracking resynthesis reverb. So now let's take a listen to this sound using Adaptiverb. And again, you can start eventually. Playing around with parameters to change the sound. And that will be the goal afterwards. Other things that you can do, and I will show you this later in this video, is you can automate certain parameters. And you can do this in all of the DAWs. So we've got the dry wet mix, right? What if I were to do this? Dry wet mix. Let me close this for a second. And just on this pitch here. And let's say I started about here. And let's bring this down. And I started bringing it in as the sound unfolded. You're holding this pitch down. It's really nice. Now we're going to start changing it. That H delay now is adding some tail. The Adaptiverb and the Pro R have tail, but when you start adding the echo in there, that also will help. Another bit that you might not be able to conceive of now is that I'm going to create an envelope for this once I get this recorded into and set up into Kontakt. But if I just did a fade in like this right now very quickly, let's actually make this fade in longer. And these are things that you can play using your controllers to animate the sound actually over time. And that's what makes sound interesting, to have a sound develop over time. It's what real instrumentalists playing orchestral instruments do all the time. They don't play static notes. Just by the fact that they're blowing through a tube, or they're bringing a bow across a string, or they're blowing into a mouthpiece on a reed, their breath and their hands change the timbre of the sound as they're holding it out. And these are the ways that you can program sounds from your simple monosynth to create very complex and evolving textures. So that's our first example. On this one, I have created a bit of an envelope. Again, I've created a filter here using 2 of the stock Pro Tools EQ3 one band. Let's take a look at some of this. So let's play the sound starting here. And as you can see, I've automated the frequency here, right? So that the sound is getting brighter and louder as it unfolds. Another really cool tool that I use is this thing called Quadravox. And what this does is that it creates a copy of your sound and transposes it. And it has notation here. And basically, these are all intervals relative to the pitch, the fundamental pitch that's being fed into Quadravox. When you have this G here, that means if you're playing a C, you'll hear a G. But if you're playing a D, you'll hear an A. It's basically the interval of a fifth, the interval of a fourth. The next one I have a sixth up and then an octave up. And I've got these set up in 2-beat increments. I've got them at different levels and I've got them panned. Let's just take a listen to what the Quadravox does to this one particular sound. Let me pan this in the center just for the moment. I've taken that single pitch and I've created, say it's a C, so that'd be C, G, F, a suspended chord, A, right? And then C again. This pitch actually is a fourth above on this track. So then this would be F, C, B flat, D, and F. And then at the same time, I'm doing a similar thing. Yeah, the same exact thing, a fifth up. Right now, I'm creating a very harmonically complex series of notes that unfold over time. So let's listen to the 2 of these tracks together. Let's move up a little bit higher pitched. And now the left side comes in. And the sounds get brighter over time. And there is feedback on those because they're basically pitched delays. So now let's add the fundamental and play the whole bit. Okay, so that's nice. And we're running it through a similar, the first two stages of my signal chain are similar. As is this one. And this. So these are all the same. Pro are also the same. Okay, so I think I wanted consistency. And the adaptive verb, though, is choir like B flat sus2 that I've tweaked. So basically, it's adding, if you take the pitch that you're being fed in to the adaptive verb, it's creating a sus2 chord, which if in the key of C would be C, D, and G. So you're adding those harmonics to the already harmonically complex patch that I've set up. And I've also, excuse me. So I haven't done any automation with this one yet, but let's take a listen to this, all of this together now. Really, really beautiful sound. I'm taking the raw materials that I created from my monosynth and I'm expanding out what they sound like by processing them. If you're an artist who creates music inside of the computer or an electronic artist that does DAW-less jamming, part of your time should be spent every week creating sounds and creating a palette of sounds actually that are unique to you, whether it's an hour a week, 2 hours a week, half an hour a day, whatever it is. There should be time spent creating your own unique, individualized soundscapes. On this one, I'm only using 2 tracks, the fundamental pitch, and I took the one that's a fifth up, and instead of re-recording everything an octave higher, I simply transposed this up another 3 steps or 4 steps, whatever it is, to make this second one an octave higher than this. And I'm automating the volume, right, so that it fades in. And these are all consistent. I want every pitch that I play to be consistent so that if I play chords, they all rise up together. Additionally, on the top voice, I have my Quadravox set up to the same array of pitches that were on the previous one. The reason I'm doing this and not changing some of these things is that this is a set of sounds that I'm creating, right? They're variations on a theme. Then I'm putting this again through all of these plugin chains, except this time I've got something a little bit unique. Let's take a look at this. Let's go up a little higher. And this is our sound. It's really nice. You can hear the octave is starting to come in. And the slight tuning discrepancies between the oscillators really adds a nice edge to the sound. But I wanted to take that a little bit further. So I used this plugin called Decapitator from SoundToys. Let's look at what I've got here. I've got the punish on, and I'm using the N. And I've added some high cut to get rid of some of the digital distortion. And I'm automating the drive so that it gets more intense as time goes on. We can see that here, Decapitator drive. Let's play this pitch. We could see now that as time goes on, it gets really, really intense and it starts distorting. So I've added a trim plugin because I like that distortion. Brought everything down 7.4 dB. To this, I'm adding my Pro R, my H delay, which is the same, and adaptive verb. What am I using this time? The same as before. So let's listen to the aggregate of everything now. Really a useful sound. I could see using that in some sort of science fiction. Let's say it's an aliens type of a thing and the people are creeping around in a spaceship somewhere and you don't know what's going to happen and create more and more tension. I could see that working. Now, again, you can, inside of Kontakt, you'll be able to add even more animation to the sound. Sorry, let me do that one more time. Not bypassed. That's obviously overloading the mini filter, distorting a little bit, which I'll take care of here by bringing the overall volume of every one of these clips down. These are my rendered and named files ready for Kontakt. All right, let's take a look at the last one I did today. One of the cool things about having a modular system is that people create these really amazing pulsing things. These are all from the same samples that we started out with. There's my sawtooth wave. Again, my tape and my multiband compression. The next thing I have is this thing called the gatekeeper. This is a volume gate. It creates pulsing rhythmic effects. So this is 3-on-4. It was a preset that I tweaked a little bit. Let's take a listen to this sound with this on. And then add to that our Quadravox. Our Pro R. Adaptive verb. Yeah, so I've got the wet gain down much lower on this so that it just adds a sheen in the background. And then before we get to adaptive verb, I actually turned the volume up a little bit because it was a little soft. What I'll do is I will take this track here, which is the aux track that all of these are coming through. In Pro Tools, I'll commit this. It will create one long audio file. And then I will trim these all out so that they are the same length. They start in the same spot. And then I will name them properly so that Kontakt can see them. So this is my naming convention. Sirin, power saw, _C0. And you can see E flat 0, G flat 0, all the way up. G flat 2, C3, all the way up to C4. And that's as far as I've gone. I've done that with all of these. Once I get these all done, I can do some fine tuning of the volume, whether I normalize everything and then use clip gain to make sure that all these volumes are very similar, which helps me in Kontakt. I'll then Command-Shift-K, export these as clips, and then I choose my directory, and I choose, this one's the power saw, and then I just export them, and then they all end up looking like this. Let's go down to Kontakt for a second. Opening Kontakt, and let's take a look at my template. So I created this for this particular set of sounds. I might do something different for the next set of sounds, but I wanted to be able to program these quickly. In a different set of sounds, I might have a different set of plugins inserted in Pro Tools. I might do different sound design techniques, different kinds of layering of sounds. This is what I wanted to do for this particular project. I had a concept, and then I figured out the best way to realize that concept. Additionally speaking, I am open as I'm working to changing that concept if something more interesting comes up. And I've got my velocity set up. And here are my instrument insert effects. Again, I'm not an expert at Kontakt, but I know enough to do what I'm doing here. And even at my level of knowing this stuff, I can create some really compelling sounds and instruments that I can use in my projects in the future. I've got tape saturation set up. It should be high quality. I have a second tape saturation, and I've got that in this particular set up so that the mod wheel, let me record enable this. Mod wheel automates the gain. I have mod wheel on my MoDX keyboard here, and I also have mod wheel set up on my Nano Control too. That will add some extra crunch to the sound. Then I have my 4-pole ladder filter. I've got that high quality, and I've got this programmed so that on the Sirin, I can use the cutoff and the resonance. It's very easy to do this. So if I remove the MIDI automation, if I wanted to program that in to, let's say, this fader on my Nano Control, I would learn MIDI CC, and then boom, there I go. Remove, and I'm going to learn that again because this is my template, and I'm using my Sirin. But you could set this up to do whatever you want for automating these processes in real time. And I believe I also have the attack set up. Yeah, use it with the attack here and the release here. I'm not worried right now about these guys. If I wanted to automate those in real time, I could set them up on the controller here and probably would do so. And then lastly, I've got a convolution reverb at the end of the chain. And I have a space before the convolution reverb in case I want to add another time-based effect. Sometimes I'll add in the rotary effect. It's really cool. And then I use one of these faders to adjust the mix, the wet-dry mix. And I do the same thing here. So on this one, I've got MIDI CC2, which is on this fader here, controlling the wet-dry mix. And I have preset in, I believe, a 480, I think, Hall at 2.9 seconds. And I might have a plate on some of these, but I can adjust the actual impulse response later. But my automation is all set up in advance. So now that that's done, let me close this and let's play through some of these sounds as they exist. Additionally, I have expression panel set up here on MIDI CC7. So it's controlling the volume. We're going to try the power saw first. And this is basically a suspended fourth chord. Do I have something else? I've just changed the envelope here. And I can add some. Add some grit. Add some resonance. Some release. So that's very useful. And like I said, it's almost like you have a synth because you can control all these things. And it's nice and wide because I've got two of the oscillators panned right and left, and then the fundamental panned right down the middle. You can set up whatever kinds of effects chains you want and whatever kinds of automations you want inside of your Kontakt instruments or whatever software sampler you use. This is just what I did for this particular one, although I do like to have control of the envelope and the filter on the Sirin. So let's take a look at this next one, the ambient sawtooth. Let's open up this filter. I can add some release to that. And let's look at the Sirin Evo saw. So let's open up that filter a little bit more. I did that with the pitch bend wheel on the keyboard, which you might not be able to see on the video. You can see that I've created some really beautiful textures here. Long, unfolding textures. It's interesting, when I've got this with resonance up, I almost get a quality that I find on the Oberheim synths. This is the gated saw pulse at 60 beats per minute. The reason I put 60 beats per minute in the title is so that I remember when I'm programming this what it was originally recorded at. The next thing we'll do is we'll look at the wave editor and we'll see all these grids here, right? Now, once I make sure that I'm starting at about the beginning of each sample, they all start in the same place. I turn on the grid here and I type in 60 beats per minute and I use Time Machine Pro. And the reason I do that is then that means that every sample will be the same tempo no matter what pitch you play it at. So let's say I take this pitch. Let me see where that is. So that's right here, right? That's this C. Now, if I were to play this a whole step down at B flat, you would assume that it might actually be slower. But it's not. It's the same tempo. So if I play them together, they should create an interlocking rhythm. That's a little muddy, but you can hear how the rhythm is tightly synced. Now, the other thing that this does, it allows me to sync to the tempo of my sequencer. So let's say I take this up to about 80 beats a minute. Let me play this. You can hear that that's now much faster than the original version. And if I bring this down to 50 beats a minute, it'll be slower. All of these are synced. And let me play a few things here. Again, interesting timbre. Oops, excuse me. That was playing back from Pro Tools. Right, cleans up. I'm going to bring the mod wheel down. Now, things like this, I particularly think sound really cool, really filtered, and very low. They get this really ominous bubbling characteristic. Right, really cool. If you've lasted this long, thank you so much for watching. The last bit is that I'm making all of these samples available for you to download, not the Kontakt programs, but the raw samples. I'd be really interested to see if any of you come up with some really cool sound design stuff programmed into Kontakt. Let me know. Leave some comments, questions in the comment box below. And these are basically all of my processed samples, all labeled properly. Right? There's 14 of these. Eventually, I'm going to make Kontakt instruments from all of those things I did, and they'll be up probably on the Piano Book website at some point in the near future, hopefully. But if not, you'll always be able to download these raw samples here. If you enjoyed this video, give a thumbs up. For more content, please subscribe, and if you'd like to be notified, ring that bell. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one.